would have gotten diagnosed in childhood, then you would have already learned the tools and strategies to use to manage your everyday life.
So I'm not trying to show any hate or anything, but just because somebody is early diagnosed, especially as an autistic person, does not mean that they will have tools to help regulate them in their everyday life. The move away from stigmatizing diagnosis, as well as moving away from stigmatizing mental health and autism especially, if you look at our the track record of it historically, we've only had less stigmatization about autism within maybe the last decade, or even fewer than that, maybe in the last 4 or 5 years, honestly. And even in the early stages right now, where we're still moving away from trying to unstigmatize autism and mental health, we're still in the means of only listening to specific voices and not seeing the whole picture when it comes to diagnosis. And regionally, it depends on your diagnosis and where you get diagnosed. So if you were an American person who got diagnosed in the early 90s, like my friend Kiki, they definitely did not have an experience where it was helpful for them. A lot of those people were experimented on, or in some ways, they still even had institutions for people who were autistic. And so there really wasn't any help for them, and they were just put into an institution. I'm all for trying to give people more resources to help accommodate themselves when it comes to being out in the world and finding the ways to treat their autism and accommodate themselves. But again, there's different scales of autism and support needs, and just having fidgets or resources and tools isn't going to be enough for one particular autistic person. We need to have services also to be provided, and sometimes that means having caregivers, or sometimes that means not even being able to really go out in society, and things have to be brought to them, and that's fine. But it needs to be recognized that the few things that help, like low support needs and sometimes even medium mod support needs, autistic people, is not going to be helpful for high support needs or caregivers enough in really accommodating the challenges that they face every day. And then I was going to do a video more to explain the nuance on masking, because this idea of unmasking is great, but it's also very exclusive to white individuals. Unmasking, depending on the region and area where you're at, especially if you're a person of color or especially if you're Black, is absolutely unsafe. You cannot unmask in any way, because you become and you set yourself up to be looked as a threat. So that's just something I want to add to this, because yes, I do want us to make sure we're amplifying the positive ways of making sure how to accommodate ourselves, but we also need to be realistic in how much those accommodations can help for different support needs and different people of color. Also, to be quite frank for myself, I'm very glad that I'm late diagnosed, because I have been diagnosed during an era of mental health where things are a lot more accessible and they're a lot more understanding and compassionate. But if I was diagnosed with autism when I was younger, there absolutely would not, I probably wouldn't have been the same person that I am today, and I might have been more of a least of myself, because the resources that we had, and especially for American resources, is to just medicate people and not to actually have tools of ways to cope and to strategize, or that is neuroaffirming. So I'm not trying to also fearmonger diagnosis. I think we absolutely need more diagnosis in general in order to access more services. But this idea or concept that just because somebody was early diagnosed, it does not connote that they have more opportunities than those who were late diagnosed, like myself.